Chris. My name's Scott Fleming. I'm a level 2.5 alcoholic. I know enough not to call myself a 3, Play it safe. And that workshop on intimacy and relationship was awesome this morning. And, I learned a lot. And I've been living with Disco Dave for the last 3 weeks. So every morning it's like, Scotty, the Roosters, they went on to the next round, That's how I'm woken up. So it's been an adjustment, in that relationship and living with him and being intimate. So, I first want to thank my Creator for allowing me to be here with you today sober. I didn't think of a drink so far today. That's a miracle for a guy like me. Secondly, I want to thank the committee. As my friend Gary Kay, God rest his soul, used to say, thank you for the kind invitation to come and share a little of me with you and you with me. And, I've been hostless pretty much. Chris stepped in, but, and Jordan, everything's okay with Jordan's father. I've been talking to him. I haven't met him, but, I know his father's okay. No, but I did meet him, and Bill mentioned about the gift basket getting there late. I didn't get mine until yesterday, But it was because it went to, Steve came up to me and said, is your real name Zachary? I said, no, my name's Scott Fleming. He said, all right, so Zachary got the gift basket, and I guess he went to town on it, So it shows up with, I think random things they threw in from Zachary's room, like toilet paper and, a couple pads and pens from the hotel just to fill the thing. I gave it to Dave, he was happy to have it, but that stuff is all incidental. What's so important, man, is that I come here and you guys have welcomed me here, and I meet people like Aaron who tells me he loves me. And I meet people like Scott who says, it was good to get to know you. I'm going to come listen to you on Sunday morning, And then I got to go to some of your local meetings, and I got to meet you guys. And if you're new, man, that's all you have to look forward to, is that. People telling you they love you when they meet you, and I'm going to come hear you because I met you, and I want to hear your story. And I was alone when I got here. I was all alone. And I come from a really wonderful family. We have different stories, and my story is my family, my mother and father are the most non-judgmental people I've ever met. I never heard my mother or father say one derogatory comment about another human being. And I love them for that. And growing up, we weren't perfect. They had their challenges in their marriage and that sort of thing. But I'm going to tell you this, they came from the streets of Philadelphia, from the housing projects, and they wanted to give their kids a better life. And they worked hard, and my mother put herself through school. My dad's a disabled vet, and they worked hard, saved money, and they moved us to the suburbs, and they gave us a good life where they got us involved with sports and activities. And, it was tough growing up. My mother's a teacher. I'm like a D- student, But education was stressed as being important, and I had all the opportunities, and it was a very loving and positive environment to grow up in. But I don't know. I look back and I don't know if I ever really. I knew I was loved, but I don't know if I really felt that. The way I compensated for this feeling I had. So many members share so eloquently about, is that when my brother was born, this beautiful boy, a year and a half younger than me, I put my hands on that kid. I was abusive. I verbally abused him and would say despicable things to put him down and keep him down. And I would go through life because I didn't measure up, trying to feel better than you in any way I could. And around 13 years old, alcohol came into my life like it comes into most people's lives. But for me, and probably for you, it was profound. I had no idea what was about to happen, and they were passing around, booze in the woods, and I took a few swigs on that, and next thing I know, I'm connected to you. I don't know if I knew how disconnected I was until that moment. And I could talk to the girls, things I was always afraid of, and it felt like the guys wanted me and I belonged. And booze became the most important thing in my life that very night. Now, I didn't drink every day from that moment on. I couldn't because I was young. I was 13, 14, 15. I'm growing up, and I'm young, but I could tell you this. I thought about alcohol every day from that moment on. Thoughts like, what older guys can I get to know that can buy me alcohol? You know, going through school on the weekend, where's the keg party? Where are we going to? Couldn't wait to be around that sense of ease and comfort that our big book describes so beautifully. So alcohol owned me mentally. And I went through high school and I felt like I had arrived. As Bill talks about, I partied and I was a popular kid, which I love. You know, because booze made me feel superior to you. And I felt like a part of, and it seemed fun. It felt good. I'm a feel-good guy. And I played a lot of sports. I played 4 sports in high school. And the one I excelled in the most was tennis. And my senior year, I was flown down to a school in North Carolina to play in front of the coach. And I'm down there. They're in the regional finals outdoors, but the rain's coming. And they had a rain delay, and we had to move it into the Raleigh Cricket Club. And when we're in there, myself and an older guy noticed that there was a wedding reception being set up, you know, and there was a keg being set up on ice, you know, and we looked at each other and we both said, well, let's steal this thing. And we did. We stole that thing while the match was going on. We put it out in the bushes. His buddy came with a pickup truck, took it back to his house. We finished the match, went back to the dorm room, pretended we were going to bed, snuck out, and I drank all night long as a senior in high school, man, until the birds came up. And I even stole the dude's car whose apartment we were at and couldn't find my way back. I mean, it was a blast. And I knew that was the school I wanted to go to. And I fly back home, and I graduated by the skin of my teeth. And of course I drank that night, graduation night, and I drank the whole summer. I go on a bender. I'm living with a guy basically whose parents are away, and I get arrested halfway through that summer, and now I have some consequences due to my drinking. But see, my mother and father, they already knew there was a problem with me and booze. My mom's one of 7, my dad's one of 11. They grew up in alcoholism. They knew what it looked like. They knew what it felt like. And they had been asking me since I was about 17 to get help because they knew that I had a problem. But there's no way I'm going to let you take away the one thing that makes me feel comfortable in my own skin at 17 or 18. No way. But now I'm facing charges. And I wanted to go away to that college. And so I thought, you know what? If I go to rehab, the judge will be lenient on me, and I'd appease my mother and father. So I go into rehab at 18 years old with no thoughts I'm going to stop. But when I'm in there, I can't help but listen to these old men. They were like 30 years old. You know? They were in these small groups talking about the things that they lost that I was about to embark on. Like the one guy, you know, he hasn't seen his kid in 4 or 5 years. The one guy shared about how his mother and father never got to see him do anything with his life before they died. I could feel the shame and remorse. It was palpable. Education's lost, careers given away. Man, I didn't want to, and I also, somewhere in there, I related to the way they drank, and I thought to myself, man, booze is way too important to me at this age, and I want to go away and make my mother and father proud. I want to take advantage of the scholarship. I want to go have an education and have a career, and I set off to do that, man, and I didn't drink for 29 days. You know? The 30th day is when my parents dropped me off at that college and they drove away. And I had no idea what I was up against. I had no idea. I had no defense against the first drink. I really thought I was going to hang out with the guys that didn't drink. I was going to play tennis. And that night, the guys on the team came over and they said, welcome to the school. And they said, you want some, they asked me the wrong question. They said, you want beer? And I said, yeah, give me a 6-pack of Bud Pounders, just like that. It reminds me of our history when Roland is with Young in Switzerland. He's there voluntarily. He wants to stop drinking. And after a year, he says, you're good to go. And he, in Paris on the way home, was asked if he wants some wine at dinner, and he drinks it, and he's dumbfounded as to why he didn't. He goes back to the doctor begging him, well, I thought you fixed me. See, I didn't know what I was up against. And they came back with that pounder. I cracked that can. I put it to my lips. It went down into my body, into my bloodstream. My eyes watered up, and I got that feeling right here that I love more than anything else in the world. And I remember thinking, what was I doing not drinking for 29 days? This is the best feeling in the world. And I couldn't stop drinking that night. The guys that brought me the beer were in bed, and I'm up all night. And I make a phone call to my aunt crying, a phone call I would be ashamed of for a long time because I really didn't want to drink. And I came to the next morning and it was on. I couldn't stop. Within a year and a half I was out of that school. Never did I play one match of tennis. I eventually would end up in the dean's. I could not go to school or class my sophomore year. I was isolated. I'm 19 years old, and here's the curse of alcoholism, or maybe the gift. But what happened to me was the magic was wearing away. I was no longer feeling a part of, connected to you, talking to the girls. I was now isolated, antisocial. Nobody wanted to be around me. And I'm confused. I'm drinking more and more and more, and I'm not getting that effect. Dean eventually had me in his office and said, "Scott, if you don't leave, we're gonna arrest you and press charges." I was doing some illegal things, and that made it easier for me to call my father and say I need help. And they flew my parents. I have great parents. They fly me home. I enrolled in the community college. I thought it was the college campus that was the problem. So I enrolled in the community college, and I would have been the number one tennis player there, and within a week or two, I can't even show up. I'm stopping off in the woods drinking with the guys that drink the way I drink. And for the next 10 years of my life, I live it meaningless and purposeless. I could tell you the war stories. We all have them, DUIs, getting locked up. That stuff all happened to me. But what I really want to tell you is that, man, my sister is 10 years younger than me. When she was born, I fell in love with her. And I taught her how to ride a bike, and I would race home to the bus stop so I could go pick her up on the bus stop. And now, as my sister's growing up in this household in her most important years, I'm abusive. Alcoholism is progressing in me, and I'm a monster. I'm bringing dangerous things into the home. I take my parents hostage through my 20s. They beg me to leave, and I barge my way back in. I'd use up my friends until I had no more. End up virtually homeless at times. Not sleeping in tents or eating out of dumpsters, but like nowhere to go, evicted. I could never hold down an apartment. I don't know how people do it. I would get an apartment, have a good job, I'd progress quickly, next thing I know, the lights are out. Landlord's knocking on the door, you got to go, you haven't paid your rent in 3 months. Took a girl hostage for 8 years. I used to say it was a girlfriend. It wasn't. It was a hostage. She loved and cared about me. I drug her through my alcoholic life and used and abused her. She was my safety blanket. Finally, she cut it off. It's partly the reason I'm here. I can't believe she cut it off. She finally did, and it helped me get here. At the end, I thought I was schizophrenic. Now, my mother is a good mother, and she's a teacher, like I said, and she had me in front of therapists, guidance counselors, psychiatrists my whole life, because there was always something wrong with me. And now I'm in front of a doctor and thinking I'm schizophrenic because I'm hearing things, seeing things up for days, and I'm prescribed meds. See, I wanted to be anything but booze. Don't tell me it's alcoholism. You can't take that away from me. I wasn't schizophrenic. I'm not schizophrenic. I had untreated alcoholism. In the end, I couldn't work at all, and I would come to in the morning, and I would wish I didn't wake up. That I had to suffer through another day of the degradation and the loneliness and the confusion. And I don't know why, but one day, because there was many times where I thought about that rehab and I wanted to go back, and I just never, I guess the pain wasn't great enough. And this one day, I don't know why, I had another opportunity just taken from me. And I had been evicted again, and I had nowhere to go. My mother said no, and I was drinking that night, and I came to in the morning, and the realization of my life at 29 years old came upon me, and the pain was great, and I cried, and that rehab came to my mind, and for some reason, I can't believe it, but still to this day, but I made that call. And they said, well, why don't you come on in? I said, can I come in on Monday? Because it was a Friday, And they said, no, come on in now. And I did. I went in. And I didn't tell them the truth about how much I drank or what I did. Because I wanted, outpatient. I didn't want inpatient. And they gave me intensive outpatient. I started going 4 to 9 every day. And I felt safe at this outpatient. See, I was shot at and hit, hurting from booze, and I felt safe at this outpatient, but there was one problem. They wanted you to go to meetings. And there was was a chalkboard, and it had everyone in that group's name. Like Sue went to 5 at a clubhouse over the weekend. Bobby went to 2. Scott 0. And it kept saying 0 and 0. One day, Dennis, the counselor, said, "I want you to stay after. I want to talk to you." He said, "If you don't make meetings, you can't be a part of this group." And I was afraid to not be a part of that group because I was afraid I would drink. So I was nudged into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I walked into the Greater Levittown group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I sat on that back wall. And I thought my life was over. And Larry spoke. Larry A. from the town next to, not too far from mine. And as Larry spoke, I listened. And here's what happened for me as I listened to Larry is one, he sounded reasonably happy without alcohol. 2 is he drank just like I drank. But 3, and most important, is I believe Larry. And I got hope instantly. I got hope instantly. And you guys surrounded me because I put my hand up as first time in Alcoholics Anonymous, and Tall Paul was the first person to shake my hand. By the way, when I see Larry, I see him every year at the sepia roundup. I thank him. And Tall Paul came up to me and shook my hand. When I see him, I thank him. He's the first person that shook my hand in AA, and they welcomed me in. And they said, "You want to go down and we play music?" I got sober in a clubhouse. They have music, a band down there. And I'm not a musician, but I was happy that they invited me down there. And I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous that very night. And I haven't fallen out of love with it. I fall deeper in love every day. I know that's not everyone's story. I know that because that night, as I was leaving that meeting, going down the handicap ramp, Frank was walking up complaining about these meetings under his breath. Frank can't stay sober to this day, God bless him. It wasn't my experience. I fell in love with you from the moment I met you. I got into my little car because that's all I had left, and I went to my mother and father's house, and they let me in. I think my mother and father want me to live with them today, you know, with what you've done to me. And they let me into the home. And I came back to AA every single day. Around the clock. I got sober at the clubhouse at 9, noon, 5:30, 8, and midnight. And I was out of my mind. I couldn't work, and I stayed on club time in between the meetings. I got to know Nancy K. with 35 years, one of my heroes. Adam T. with 42 years. Bob C. with 50 years. When you shared in a meeting, Bob would share after you, and he would say something, comment like what you shared sounded stupid, you know. And unfortunately, you got to stay sober through those feelings if you're new. And I came to love Bob for being there every night. And I got really active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I attended your business meetings, which were very interesting, you know. I became the alternate intergroup rep at like 3 or 4 months of sobriety, and the intergroup rep, Sarah, relapsed, so I became the intergroup rep at like 4 or 5 months of sobriety. I'm in service at that level of Alcoholics Anonymous that early on. Man, I'm branching out to other meetings. We're going to the diners afterwards, talking about the wonderful things we heard in here and how our lives might change. I got a pocket full of guys' numbers. Guys' numbers. There were men in my home group like John Bragg, who would become my sponsor, and Bob B., who was his sponsor, who talked about being a man of honor and dignity, things I always secretly craved but never could be. So I hung out with those guys. I chaired meetings. I cleaned up your ashtrays, and I don't smoke. Man, back then you could smoke. It was so smoky you didn't have to worry about anonymity because you couldn't see anybody, you know? I'm making coffee. I didn't drink coffee back then. Like, I'm doing everything Alcoholics Anonymous asked me to do. Everything except for 12 things. You know? And my life got so good on the outside so quick, it doesn't even make sense. I don't know what your dreams are. Maybe you have them, maybe you don't. I have them, and I won't apologize for them. I've always wanted to be a good son, a good brother, a good student, a good friend, a good guy in the community. I never could be those things. Other dreams I had that were given to me at birth, I believe, where I always wanted to travel the world. When I was 15, I said to my mother, all I want for Christmas is a map of Europe. I stared at that thing and never went anywhere. I was too afraid to live. I couldn't get off the bar stool. And anyone that did live, I hated them for it. Like my brother was younger than me. He worked hard, saved his money, traveled the world. My mother traveled the world. She's a teacher in the summer, saved her money. Never invited me, invited my brother, you know. I won't be that guy in AA. I'm your cheerleader. I hope your life goes wildly successful. Yeah, it'll be ups and downs, but I hope it goes wildly successful. Whatever it is you dream, I want you to go do and come back and share how good it is. I couldn't do that back then. Real quickly, I start to become a hero to my sister. She's writing me a poem of how I'm her hero. I was abusive for years. My mother and father are showing me off to the family. Look at our son. He's back. Look at his eyes, his skin. That girl that cut me off, part of the reason why I'm here, she called me. I couldn't get her to answer my calls or knocks on her door. She said, I heard you're sober. I ran off to her, made the fake amends, you know. The one that later on she deserved and got when I got to the 8th step, which was beautiful. 5 months of sobriety, my brother comes to me and says, something else that happens to us early on is, I think, when we put the drink down and we come in here and we fall in love with the fellowship, beginning of the services, we start to find out what our gifts are, other than this gift. And I found out real quickly that God gave me a mind for business. And I made a couple moves because I'm not drinking anymore, and I'm in the home group loving it, and I'm saving money, and I'm living rent-free at home because my parents are in love with me, and I got a little bit of money in the bank, and my brother comes to me at 5 months of sobriety and says, let's go to Ireland. And I had a commitment in the literature club, with the literature, so I came across, right after you asked me that question, I came across this book for all the meetings in Ireland. I thought, that's a sign to go, you know? So we plan this trip for Ireland, 6 months sober. For 10 days, we go to Shannon, Ireland. I get off the plane. I knew right away it was going to be hard. I'm looking over the ring of curry the second day thinking, why can't I have a few beers with my brother? Why can't I? The third day, I make a conscious decision. I will drink before this is over. I know I'm going to drink. Now, I'm making meetings in Ireland. I'm calling home group members. I'm journaling about this drink that's on me, and I'm not a writer, but I can't get rid of it. Fourth day, I end up in a restaurant/pub in Donegal, and my brother orders a beer because he can drink, and I want to drink so bad it hurts. And I would have drank if it wasn't for my brother. But I already told you how I abused him my whole life, and he knew I was a sober member of AA, and I just turned to my brother and I said, Will, I got to get out of here. And we left, and we went to our bed and breakfast, and I went into the bathroom. I didn't know what to do. I pacing in there, but from being here with you and paying attention and never being on my cell phone in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I hope I never am. If you are, we can still be friends. I'm just saying, I'm not, ever. Because I give reverence to this. This place saved my life and those around me, and I pay attention. And what I heard at some point in your sobriety, the only thing between you and a drink will be God. And I'm in that bathroom, and I dropped on my knees for the first time in my life. I said, God, I want to drink, but I don't want to drink. Please help me. I didn't drink. But more than that, I got off my knees. I didn't want to drink. That's the first time in my life that ever happened. Since booze hit my lips at 13 years old, it owned me. I was a slave to it. In my mid-20s, I would wake up or come to with my crappy life, wishing I didn't, and I'd walk to the edge of the inn, crying, wiping my tears off, and I had to go. And now it's been taken from me. I even flew to Glasgow and went to Edinburgh on my own. I'm walking because he had already been there. My brother, he wanted to spend more time in Dublin. I'm walking around at 6 months sober in Scotland, in Edinburgh. Bar lights were flashing, which to me are the most attractive things in the world. And there was no pull. There was no I wish I could. I was free. I flew back to Dublin to meet up with my brother. We get on the flight home. Now I'm interested in your big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. There was a guy trying to sponsor me. His name was Jimmy Waugh. Jimmy said to me one time in that first 6 months, Scott, don't you think guys with 5 years need guys to sponsor to stay sober? And I thought I'd do him a favor and let him sponsor me. And he'd take me into the basement and he would try to, go into the doctor's opinion and there's a solution in Bill's store and we Gnostics and pull out the first 2 steps. I wasn't receiving the gift. And now I had the big book, and I was interested in it because something happened to me in Ireland. And I opened it up, and it happened to be we Gnostics, and the first lines my eyes see on that plane ride home is either God's everything or is nothing, he either is or isn't what's your choice to be. And I knew he was. And I knew I'd be okay for the rest of my life if I depended on him. See, alcohol came close, but it wasn't real, and this was real, and I knew it with everything in my being. And this other thought came to me. It was inspirational or intuitional. It said, when you get off this plane, go see that man that when he was in your home group, you were afraid of him but attracted to him at the same time. His name was John Bragg. I loved when John was in the meeting. I felt safe. He had a peace about him. And after the meeting, he'd be at a table like this with guys around him with the book open, and I knew he wanted to be there more than anywhere else in the world. And I didn't know what that was about, but I was curious. I also knew to stay away from him after the meeting because John could see right through me. And I wasn't doing your work, and if you got to know me, you wouldn't like me. And I was riddled with shame. I flew back to that home group. I used to sit here. He would sit here. It was like non-smoking and smoking, if you can believe that. And I moved myself closer to him, and within 2 weeks I was sitting right next to him. And he looked at me one day and said, "Do you want me to sponsor you or something?" I said, "John, I never thought you'd ask." You know what I mean? That's like asking another band to be your Valentine. It is not easy. But he picked up on that. So my journey began with the program Alcoholics Anonymous and the inside job. And because I trusted John a little bit, I allowed this man to take my hand and walk me down this path that I'm still on today. I didn't think I deserved any of this, what he had in his eyes. I didn't think I did. He said in step 2, "Scott, God wants you sober. You deserve to be sober. Let's take these steps and let's see what happens." Third step, he explained to me what it was. It was a commitment. It was a one day at a time, all in for the rest of your life. There's no more booze. You're walking with us and God. Are you in or out? I said, "I'm in." I got on my knees. I got off my knees. I didn't feel any better. But I was better. Seems to be a theme that runs through my sobriety even to this day. He told me to write the fourth. I'm afraid. I'm dragging my feet. He reminds me what I did in the third. Says, ask God for help. I asked God for help as that date approaches that he set eventually to do it, the fifth. And the pen rope, I say that prayer, God, this does not look like a good idea to me, but if it is, I ask you for the courage to write. And the pen rope by itself, you've heard it before. For 2 hours I wrote. And I called him up, and he laughed because he knows the power of God. Much like Bill and Bob when they go see Alcoholic number 3. He said, "You can't help me, I'm a goner." They laugh because they know the power of God. My sponsor knew the power of God, that if I asked, it would be given to me. And I wanted to do that fifth now. And we go into the park, and I get spiritually naked with God and my sponsor, unprotected, vulnerable. I left nothing out that I knew of. And what he showed me was the reason why booze kept showing up in my life was because I was dishonest my whole life. Like, I could see it. I was a fraud. I exaggerated, lied, tried to make things up so that you either accept me or that I could feel better than you my whole life because I never measured up. And he was able to show me this on my fifth step. And as I left that park, we had a long talk, and as I left that park, he said to me, "Scott, I'm a human being. I'm your sponsor, I'm your friend, but I'm fallible." He said, "God's all-powerful, infallible, infinite knowledge and wisdom." He said, "That's the most important relationship you have." It's what Sam Shoemaker told Bill Wilson, right? When it comes to sponsorship, he said, when you see the man with the problem, put his hand in the hand of him who has all the answers, then go home. Don't stick around and play God. My sponsor put my dependence in its proper place, and it's been there ever since. Now, I need you. But ultimately, that's where my dependence needs to be. And I go home, I take the hour, because I'm following the direction. And in that hour, something really ineffable happens to me. As I'm reflecting on my life and what we talked about in that fifth step, I felt God's overwhelming presence of love and forgiveness, and the shame melted away. I knew he forgave me for the things I started to take responsibility for in the park with him and my sponsor. Now, I had more work to do with the world, and I still do today, but I knew God forgave me, that I had a clean slate with him. And AA went from my head to my heart. It was no longer neck up. It was right here. So like words you've never had to hear my sponsor yet say is, "Who you helping?" Because it went here, and when it goes here, it wants to come out. It has to come out. It has no life unless it comes out. The experience wants to keep experiencing itself. And I haven't wanted to drink from that day to this day. And that was about 16 and a half years ago. And I leave that hour, and I go to my home group, and here's the fifth step promises coming true in my life. I'm in that home group, and I look at my friend Elena's eyes, and I realize for the first time in my life, I'm looking in another human being's eyes. I don't want to leave him. Before that, I hung my head around you. I stared at your shoes. If I had to look in your eyes, I was very uncomfortable. And then something else amazing happened to me that day. See, I took this guy named Bill home, who I'd been helping for 5 months or so while I wasn't doing your program. I was able to help him in the fellowship because my mother and father showed me how to help the less fortunate. It wasn't hard for me to, if you don't have money to buy you a meal or if you don't have a car to pick you up for a meeting. And I was doing this with Bill. By the way, Bill is schizophrenic. Bill should have an advocate at all times with him. He will never hold a job. But I know how to be kind to that man. It wasn't hard for me, so I would do this with Bill. I'd pick him up for a meeting. I'd sit next to him in a meeting and say, "How you doing today, buddy?" I'd buy him a meal afterwards. Not hard for me. But I had nothing real in the way of our program to offer Bill because I wasn't taking your steps. But that night I had something extra. I just took your fifth step. And on the way home, I said to Bill, "Hey, Bill, do you have a sponsor?" I said that to Bill because I wanted him to experience what I did earlier in the day. And he said, "Yeah, you." And I said, "Bill, I'll take you as far as I can." And it wasn't long after that we were fumbling through the first few steps. And it wasn't long after that I'm in a park, that he's afraid to write his fourth, and I remind him what he does in the third. And he writes his fourth, and we do a fifth. And I'm in a park with Bill, man, and tears are running down my cheeks. Because for the first time in my life, I was unconditionally in love with another human being. I would have spent as much time as it took in the park for Bill to know God's real and he's loved and forgiven. I would have spent as much time in the park for Bill to know he never has to drink again. I would have given up anything that had been given to me materially for Bill to have a purpose like I did with him in the park that day. And it's been my primary purpose ever since. It's the reason why I come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, Bill and Bob talk about it. We do a lot of things in here, and we have to in a vision for you. We have to stay sober. But that motive becomes secondary. It's transcended by the new motive. That my life now has usefulness. And from that I get happiness. See, I never had purpose my whole life. And here's what else happened to me from having a guy right behind me and just caring about him a little bit is that, see, I ran out and made all my amends, the easy ones. The ex-girlfriend, the other ex-girlfriend. And the financial ones were simple for me. I think because they weren't intimate or personal, it was like a business transaction. So if I took $500 from you, I owe you $500. And I had a business going, and I had a little second business going, and I'm making money. I got money in the bank. So for 2 years, I drove around in $500 cars I bought from the long timers. Like my first car was an '86 Mercury Lynx with a push-button radio, no heat, the roof hanging down, that I bought from Don, the old long timer. And I'm going to tell you something. To this day, I've never eclipsed the happiness I felt then in that car with those guys going to meetings. No matter what I've acquired in life. And I'm making all my financial amends. But I had hard ones that I was afraid to make. Like my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, my grandmother, But I had Bill catching up to me. I had Bill on his 8-step, he was up on his 8-step list, and I knew that I had to stay one step ahead of him. And I prayed for the willingness. I did what our steps say to do. I prayed for the willingness. And the courage was given to me one day to make the hardest amends that I had to make was my brother. And I went to my brother's apartment, and I cried like a baby. I don't know if he knew what was going on. He came over, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And I settled down, and I was able to make that heartfelt, sincere, direct amends. I owned the way I treated my brother my whole life and took responsibility for it. He stood up afterwards and said, "I don't know if I could ever be as honest as you were right there." I said, "I don't know how you don't hate me." And we hugged. We told each other we loved each other. And I drove home. And on the ride home, I realized that for the first time in my life, I had a relationship with him. I hadn't been drinking or hurting him for many months. But I didn't have a relationship until I looked him in the eyes and owned it. And my brother would soon after that ask me to take him through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's not an alcoholic. But I guess he wanted something more out of life, and I guess he saw what you guys did with his older brother who once abused him. And I sat down. My brother's a history teacher. My whole family are teachers. And I wasn't a good student, and he would give me a history lesson for like a year straight, every Sunday, hours. And I would take him through the steps, first with our history, which he loves, which I love. Been studying our history since I got here. I want to know how this miracle got to my heart. We see people in sports that know they're pioneers And that's just money, a career. We're talking about life-saving, life-enriching. And I was a dead man, now I'm alive. I want to know my history here. And my brother, I took him through the history, and man, we got to that four-step, and his four-step was a joke. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, his wife was on there who sometimes annoys him, you know? We looked at it from an entirely different angle, you know? He saw where he was selfish and inconsiderate, but there was one name that he could think of that he harmed, one person. His ex-girlfriend from 12 years prior, hasn't seen her since. Sarah. I said, put her on the 8-step list. Someday you got to make it right. I didn't tell him to go find her. And, he's not an alcoholic. He's not going to drink and die if he doesn't go get her now. I said, someday you got to make it right. A few months go by, I get a text message. Ran into Sarah at the Austin airport, made amends, incredible. I get on the phone with him. He says, you're not going to believe this, Scott. He says, he's walking through, he's visiting my sister in Texas. He's at the airport. His flight gets delayed. He's walking through the airport. The one person on his 8-step list, Sarah's walking towards him. They lock eyes. And he makes the amends. He was prepared to do what he had to do. And he said, Scott, that's the best experience I ever had. He called my mother and said he physically felt different when he did that. She forgave him. My brother flew home, and he soon would move to New Zealand. And I showed my brother before he left how we live in 10, 11, 12, because to me that's what it is. It's not mechanics. Yeah, we do some of that, but it's really a way of life or a dance with God. And I show him how we live in 10, 11, 12. And when he moved to New Zealand and he had a son, my first, my only nephew and my mother's only grandchild, we went over to meet him. And I'm over there, and my brother and I take a ride, and he says to me, man, I set up this amends for next week with my sister-in-law. I can see the way I reacted to her is going to affect the relationship with me, my wife, my son, my newborns. I'm like, this guy's working the program faster than I am. And it's enriching his and those around him. And that's what it's all about. My brother, after 2 years or so after my nephew turned 4, they moved back home. And at best, I would see my nephew every other weekend because there's 2 sets of grandparents. And you guys taught me better than that, though. So I called my brother and said, hey, can I do 1 day a week where I go and spend with Wild? And we picked Wednesdays. And every Wednesday, I go over to my brother's house, and I would roll around with my 4 or 5-year-old nephew and play games, whatever he wanted to do. And after the second or third time of doing this in a row, week in a row, I'm pulling out a driveway when he comes out and says, hey, can I talk? What's up? Roll the window down. And he's got like tears in his eyes. He says, thank you. I said, for what? He said, for doing this. Come on. I said, Will, you don't have to thank me for this. But I realized that I got a do-over with him. And here's the other thing is that I did that for 2 years straight with my nephew. And abruptly, my brother's wife gets a job in New Zealand and they have to go back. And I'm going to tell you something. If I didn't do that every week, I wouldn't have built the bond that I have with him. That today, every week, he'll text me and FaceTime me, and I could have missed that if I would have saw him once a month. You told me to go make amends to all my family members, and my grandmother was one, and I was never a grandson, and you said go be a grandson, show up, find out what she likes to do, spend time with her, and I started to do that. She lived in a senior citizen home, and I would play these card games with her that I didn't really particularly care for, but she did, so I would just be there and spend time with her, and I found out what she likes to do, and one of the things she likes to do was she liked to go to Lang City. So I started taking her to Lang City, and then she would say, can we stay longer? And we'd be there like all day long, but she'd spend like $20, And on one of these drives home, I said to my grandmother, Grandmama, if you hit big, what would you do? And she said, I know exactly what I would do, Scott. If I hit big, I would hire a driver to take me up to New England where I was born and raised before I die, but I know it'll never happen. From that moment, I knew I wanted to do it with her. And I'm self-employed, and I'm making all my financial amends. And I call her up, I don't know how, maybe 6 months later. I said, Grandma, remember that trip you were talking about? She said, what trip? I said, the one to New England. She said, oh, I remember. I said, I want to do it with you. She said, what do you mean? I said, I want to do it with you. She said, Scott, I'm old with a walker. You would have no fun. I don't have any money. I would need my own room. I said, well, I understand. I said, listen, I said, I really want to do it with you. I will have fun. I understand you don't have any money. It's not a problem. I got, and I had to beg her, and she let me take her. And I picked up my 86-year-old grandmother, and we went up to New England for 7 or 8 days. First stop, Lisbon, New Hampshire, where her 91-year-old brother and 84-year-old sister lived. And we got to spend the whole day together. I got to know my grandmother better, and she wanted to go up there when, in the fall when the leaves were changing. And we had an amazing. The next day was my favorite day. Her 86-year-old best friend. It took us like half a day to get up the stairs where she lived, And we're up there, and they're laughing and crying, and I'm laughing and crying. They didn't think they'd ever see each other again. Man, I took her to the field she used to run and play in, where she had her first kiss, the church she was a part of, the school she went to. We had a blast. We even went to a nudist colony in Massachusetts. We rode by. She said, turn around, I want to go in, We had a blast. I mean, we took pictures, and I think I told her I liked it a little too much, because she asked me to take her to Wisconsin the following year, And we get home from this trip, and my grandmother falls ill, and she passes away. She had 7 children, one of them being my mother. And they all came up to me afterwards and said that while she on her deathbed, because she waited for my one uncle to come up from Virginia, as they do, before she went. And she said all that she wanted to do was talk about that trip and how much fun she had and look at the photo albums of all the pictures we took. And they asked me to say the last words at her funeral. So thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous, for allowing me to be a part of my grandmother's last wish on earth. And that is the greatest trip I have ever been on. Chris mentioned about being well-traveled. See, for me, the dreams of travel have come true. And it's not way to go Scott. I understand that. It's way to go God and way to go Alcoholics Anonymous. But because of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been given the opportunity to travel to 75 countries. Since I've been here with you, February 13th, 2002 is a sobriety date that was given to me. And 95% have been inside Alcoholics Anonymous. I learned how to surf in Waikiki at the Hawaii Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous at a year sober. I learned how to ride elephants in Thailand and Laos at the Thailand Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous at 5 years sober with a bunch of friends who never left Philly. I learned how to ride camels in the Sahara Desert, where things like this happen to me. I have a friend named Spiritual Pete who asked me to be the godfather of his son, Little Pete. But they're from Moldova, the family, and the celebration's in Portugal. And I show up, and he can't believe I showed up. And he can't express how much it means to me. But before I do, I go down into Morocco. And he was supposed to meet me there, and he canceled. And I didn't know why, but I still went. And this was a time that was hard in my life, in my sobriety. This was a fetal position moment, as Teresa talked about. This was where I had given my heart to somebody, a girl that I chose, and it was broken. Never experienced that pain before. What a gift. Didn't feel like a gift for the year or 2 years or 3 years I was in it, but what a gift. And I go down to Morocco, and I'm in this pain, and I end up in the desert with nomads for 2-3 days, sleeping under the stars on camels, and I'm in there, and I'm in this pain, and my buddy's supposed to be with me, and he's not there, and this Moroccan man, his wife and baby come through on a camel, and we sit down in this resting place to have water, and we strike up a conversation, and I don't talk about AA all the time unless it's appropriate. If it's appropriate, I can't talk enough about it because you gave me life, and everything I have is because of it, and it seemed appropriate. And we're talking and getting to know each other, and the wife looked at me and said, is this like a shift in consciousness thing? I said, yeah, it is. He looked at me and said, wait, what is this thing? And I explained it some more, and he says, I can't stop drinking. He says, I can stop for about 2 months, and then I drink, and it's killing my wife and my baby. They don't have AA in Morocco. I looked. I couldn't find it because I go AA everywhere I go. And I get to talk to him about the first few steps, and we exchange emails. See, that's, if you're new, what I want to, if you come and you stay in the center, this stuff will happen to you over and over, that you know you're not alone, and in your hardest moments, God will show up. And then I go to Portugal, and man, the Moldovans have a wild celebration. They like throw the baby around the room, you know what I mean? I grab little Pete, I'm like, you know. And my life becomes abundant, as it does sometimes. And I'm traveling the world, and dreams are coming true. And as I mentioned, man, life shows up, and life will hit you. And man, did it ever hit me and put me on my back a few times. Like I said, at 8 years of sobriety or so, I gave my heart to this girl. And not only did I get heartbroken, at the same exact time, what happened for me was that my right-hand man in business that I had, he wasn't a partner. He worked for me for 4 years, robbed me of everything, took it all. So I'm heartbroken, and I'm basically bankrupt. And I can't move for 2 days. I'm in the fetal position, as Teresa talked about. And man, did I learn so much there. You know, and when this happened to me, you know, I learned a lot about tradition one in my life as well, and I let people carry me. And I had to go to my sponsor and be honest, as they say things like I couldn't believe at 8 or 9 years of sobriety, or that I'm 38 years old, or whatever I was, and I'm crying in my mother and father's home. But I realized the gift in that later, that they got to see their son, although 38, finally live life vulnerably and honestly, and get heartbroken and go to them and say, I'm hurting. And not afraid to show them that emotion. And I'm in front of my sponsor saying, I can't believe I feel this way. I feel jealous and rejected. And he said, Scott, this is recovery. Not that you don't feel these things, that you're being honest with me about it. And it's okay, because it's where you are. And I learned so much more about humility. And he taught me how to pray in that. Because he had been through brain cancer and lung cancer. And he finally said, God, thank you for this. And I started to say things like, God, just let me know you're here. Scared to death. Let me know you're here with me in this. And you guys carried me out of that. And I got to tell you, I stand here, and other things have happened along the way. See, I value those things more than I do when I'm in Iceland on top of a glacier on a snowmobile, which I had been going, this is amazing, because I don't learn up there. Yeah, you check something off that you want to do, a goal, a dream. But you don't learn up there. I seem to only learn in the fire, and I'm not at the point where I can't wait for challenging things to happen to me, you know what I mean, in life. But because of the alchemy of God, I come out, and I have more to offer. I can't tell you how many times I've been in my office or my house with a guy who's heartbroken. I've been there. I stay sober through that. I can help you. Or been stabbed in the back. That guy who stole from me everything and got me, like he's been stealing me for a year and got me big and put me in a debt at the end, I haven't seen him since. But from staying with you, before that, I had a resentment here for 2 years that I never gave up on the disciplines of 10 and 11, and it's no magic pill. I keep praying, I keep praying, I keep praying. I thought I forgave him. That feeling would come up. I never stopped coming here, praying and being honest about it. And one day, right, I had to go make amends to that guy. That I saw where I was dishonest. Another guy got into business with that lied to me with our lawyers, and I saw the emails, and he was embarrassed and admitted he lied. But man, that hurts, and I had to walk away from that business and that friendship. But I learned through that resentment that when I got to this one, I didn't hate this guy when I found out. I was scared to death and it hurt, but I didn't hate him when he took all that money from me. I had compassion. I couldn't imagine how he must feel. There's no way he can stay sober. That's got to be terrible. If he came in right now, I would shake his hand. I wouldn't let him hold my wallet. You know what I mean? But I'd shake his hand. And what else happened to me when that heartbreak happened and that guy stole all that money is that this guy shows up in my life who cannot stay sober, been around AA all over the East Coast, can't stay sober. Now I have no girlfriend and no business. I have all the time in the world to give him. And man, I took this guy everywhere, and he starts to, he goes through the steps, and he starts to sponsor guys, and he's cleaning up. He was in jail most of his life. He didn't have teeth. I took him to the dentist and helped him with that. He never had a driver's license. I helped him with the permit, and I'm watching this guy clean up and show up and it started a meeting that's still going on in my area. And I remember watching him one time, in the back of me, watching him interact with people and seeing this transformation and saying, that's why the girlfriend and the money had to go, was because he needed me. But then quickly I realized I had it backwards, that I needed him. And in the moment of my darkest hour, if you will, in here, God put a new guy in my life to remind me what the real deal love in this thing is. And that man carried me right out of that pain. And I grow. And I stay with you guys. Man, I'm on my knees every single morning, and I thank God for the gifts He's given me. I ask Him to help me give it all away in the glory of His name, not mine. This is not mine. I did none of this to deserve this. I came to you guys, and you guys gave me everything. I'm going to share a story about what I think the essence of Alcoholics Anonymous is, and I hope I never forget it. When I was a few years sober, I was in a meeting and I heard this man sharing that he wanted a drink, and his name's Haywood. And I listened to him, and I knew I had an answer for him. And after the meeting, I went up to him and I said, Haywood, I heard what you were saying, and I can help you if you want it. And he had to go. His ride was leaving. He had 8 months sober. He had to go, and he didn't have a car. And I said, here's my number. We have a meeting on Monday night. I'd love for you to go. If you can, call me. And he left. And Monday rolled around, and he called me. He said, Scott, it's Haywood. He said, you didn't think I was going to call you, did you? I said, I wasn't sure, but I'm glad you did. He said, I want to go to that meeting you were talking about. So I take him to the meeting. And this was a meeting where we take a step a week, and there's highlighters, questions, big book out, 150 people. I love bringing guys to this meeting. He's moving around. He's fired up. Everyone's welcoming him to the meeting. And afterwards, he says, man, what was that meeting? I said, that was the big book coming alive. That was Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, man, would you be my sponsor? I said, I'd be honored to, Haywood. On the way home, I said, let's meet Wednesday, start the steps. And he says, okay. And then he proceeds to tell me he almost drank over the weekend, that he had a check come in and he had a pocket full of money. He was pacing in his apartment, but he thought about that meeting and he didn't drink. I said, whoa, we better start the steps sooner, buddy. Meet me tomorrow at noon. I go to my home group. I see him come in. He's looking around. He sees me. He lights up. He comes over, he sits down, we sit through the meeting. I take him to lunch afterwards. He tells me his whole life story at lunch. Man, this guy's been through some traumatic stuff, some abusive stuff I've never had to go through, but I listened to him. I buy him the meal, and he can't believe I bought him the meal. He said, Scott, no one ever bought me a meal. I'm like, what do you mean? It's a cheeseburger and fries. It's not a big deal. He's 46 from down south, and he said, no one ever did. I said, well, let this be your first. I take him to my home, and at that time, it took me a couple hours to do a little history, 1, 2, and 3. I've changed since then, but we're in the book. I'm trying to, pull out the powerlessness and have him identify and relate, and he's just talking about his life. And I'm letting him talk, and I'm bringing him back, and somewhere in this conversation, he says to me, what we were talking about, he reminded him of a poem by Kipling called If. He said, the world will be yours, or the earth will be yours and what's in it, but what's more is you'll be a man, my son. I said, what is this poem? And I go and I Google it and I print it up because I was into that stuff. Now, really beautiful. We get back to the step work, and it's like 5 hours later, and he still can't admit he's powerless. And I have a commitment that night that he wasn't going to. So I had to get him home. And on the ride home from paying attention to you guys, I give him another example of being powerless. He says, I see it. I'm powerless. I see it. So we start talking about the second step. We get to the third. I'm out front of his house, and we pray together. And I give him my big book, and he goes in, and I'm about to drive off, and all I hear is, Scott. And I turn, and he's at his doorknob with my book, and he said, thank you. I said, you're welcome, bud. And I drove off. And the next day, his roommate calls me and says, Scott, Haywood passed away in his sleep last night. He died of natural causes, cardiac arrest. But I have your big book here. I want to give it back to you. And a tear came down my cheek because for a moment I thought this man had been robbed of what we get in here when we give ourselves fully to this thing. But then another tear came down my cheek because I realized the gift I had been given. That in the last hours of this man's life, because of you, I had the opportunity to be kind to him, to listen to him when he talked, to buy him a meal, to bring him into my home, to open our literature with him, to pray with him. And I called my sponsor, John Bragg, at the time. I said, John, I want to thank you for what you gave me because this is what just happened. He said, Scott, I don't know if you'll ever have a more powerful experience than that. That's exactly what that man needed to go on from here. See, when Haywood was sharing about that wanting to drink at 8 months sober, I could have very easily turned my back or spit out some slogan, don't drink, keep it green, which are all good slogans. I could have very easily turned my back and went about my busy life because my life is busy. But it was only busy because of you. And I thank John for giving me something real to offer that man. That If poem hangs in my bedroom. And I've learned more about it every day like I do the steps. I was at the Las Vegas Roundup not too long after this experience, and the last speaker was up here like I am today, and she said, the last thing she said was this: I used to think I should live every day like it's my last day on earth. I don't think that anymore. I think I should live every day like it's your last day on earth. And the significance of Alcoholics Anonymous and the significance of my experience with Haywood hit me. And I realized why I was all alone, confused, hated myself, and couldn't stop drinking. Because it was all about me. And little by slowly, you guys turned me around and showed me, how can I serve? What can I give? How can I help you? What do you need? And when I do that, I experience something that alcohol, as good as it was when I was 17 or 16, as good as it felt, 15 years old, as good as that felt in the woods, in the keg, around the girls and the guys, it gives me something I never experienced with alcohol, and that is joy. That's joy. And then something else happens to me, right? I'm 10 years sober. I'm in Turks and Caicos with some friends and mentors of mine, 10 of us, all week for this AA thing. I'm 10 years sober. I'm going through another hard time in my life, another fetal position time. In fact, another heartbreak with the same girl. You know what I mean? And this is worse, and this is now over. And every night we ate together, all 10 of us. Every night. Except for on my 10th year anniversary. And I got to share something. You know, everyone gets a little turn to share a minute or two in the morning at the morning meeting with June. June was chairing this meditation. And I shared how much I love AA. Thank you. I'm celebrating 10 years today. And that night, I'm going to look for my other 9 friends, and I can't find them. And someone says, hey, I heard you this morning. I love what you said. I said, oh, thank you. Happy 10 years, by the way. I said, thank you. And they said, here, you want to eat with us? And there was 9 people in one chair, and I sat down. And the guy next to me said, wait, well, you have 10 years today? I said, yeah. He goes, oh, well, congratulations. And he goes, on my 10 years, I was given this coin with the If poem inscribed on it. I said, what did you just say? And the guy to my left said, I have a story about the If poem. That when his mother died, his brother and him haven't talked to each other in 25 years, and when they showed up, they both showed up to read the If poem at the funeral. And I, once again, knew that was exactly where I was supposed to be, that I was loved and taken care of. And that's what keeps happening to me in here, even in my darkest of times. I stay with you and I get what I need. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I just hope I come back tomorrow and I'm a better member than I was today. I hope that Bill, Bob, Ernie G, Henrietta, Lois, anyone that had anything to do up in the big meeting in the sky looking down at me are saying that kid Scott's doing a pretty good job with the gift we left him. Thank you so much.